Hi everyone, welcome back to Too Cool for Middle School. My name's Megan and I teach middle school history and English, and I'm going into, I think, like my 14th year of teaching. It's getting a little bit hard to keep track of at this point, but somewhere around there. And one of the things that in the last 14-ish years that I haven't really seen very good advice on or consensus on is grading. I don't remember talking a lot about grading in like my credential program. I don't remember that being a discussion as we were learning about what it would take to be a good teacher. And now that I am a teacher, it is one of my least favorite parts of the job. But at this point, after quite a bit of trial and error and some things that absolutely did not work and some kind of like paradigm shifts just in my own view of what school is for, I've come to a system now that I think works really well. I'm going to share with you everything that I do. I know that not everybody sees this in the same way, so you might disagree. This might not be the way that you would like to do things, and that's fine. And again, I've changed the way that I've done things over the years, but I think I've come to a pretty good system at this point. I also just wanted to mention this book, Grading for Equity. I did read this year. This is kind of the book that, administrators and teachers are currently reading as they're sort of, maybe rethinking their grading policies. There was some good stuff in here. I have a few notes. It's really dense. It's not a fun read at all, but I just wanted to be aware of like the current discourse happening around grading and equity, and I'm glad that we're having these conversations. I've come to slightly different conclusions, but there are some things in here that I think are really good. One of the first notes that I wrote in here at the end of chapter 1 was, a kinder, more equitable and transparent system will also be easier on teachers. There's no mention in this entire book of like making these practices sustainable for teachers in any way. I thought that was quite a red flag, and that's going to be more of my focus today. So I don't know, maybe combining these two things a little bit will help you come to a system that works for you. And I also underlined this part, which I think is important as we like enter a discussion about grading. Because each teacher's grading system is virtually unregulated and unconstrained, a teacher's grading policies and practices reveal how she defines and envisions her relationship to students, what she predicts best prepares them for success, her beliefs about students, and her self-concept as a teacher. That's why challenges to our grading practices don't just offend our professional judgment, they can invoke an emotional and psychological threat. I don't think he's exaggerating there. I think that's why teachers get so defensive when we start having conversations about changing the way that they grade or their late work policies or whatever. Okay, so in my middle school history and English classes, I don't assign homework. That's number one, I guess. So that makes it a little bit easier to grade because I'm not assessing things that I'm not seeing them do. I don't assign homework personally just because I have enough time to get through the material that we need to get through. I see my students every day for like 45 to 50 minutes, depending on the day. It changes slightly, but I see them every single day. We get to do history every day or English every day. And besides an independent reading requirement that I have for my English students, I don't assign separate homework assignments. We can do everything in class. We can do everything together. I can monitor students as they are working on things, and if they didn't finish something in class, then it would be homework. They would need to finish it on their own time because we're going to move on the next day, or if they were absent, they need to do the work. There's always students who give you this weird look when you're like, oh, you didn't turn in this assignment, and they're like, yeah, I was absent. I'm like, uh-huh, right. And you just have like this stare down, and they're like, I wasn't here. Like, I know. This is the assignment. It's been 2 months. You gotta get it in. So without going too deep into like my philosophy behind this, I'm just very impacted by workers' rights strikes and like strong unions in the early 20th century, and 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, and then 8 hours for what you may. And our students need at least 8 hours of sleep, and then they are at school for about 8 hours, and then I think that they should just have their other 8 hours to themselves, and you know, they play sports or they take lessons or maybe have chores or maybe they want to watch some TV. Like, you have the right to waste some of your free time. I don't really want to infringe on their free time. I want to use our in-class time really well. So I do get mad if they are doing other work during my class, if I see them copying their friend's math homework or they have some other classwork open on their Chromebook. No, we are not doing that. So we are using our in-class time well. I feel like that's a responsibility that I have as a teacher. I like reading together in class. I like watching videos together in class. I don't really like the flipped classroom model just because I like to have those like reactions and stuff in class together. So I suppose that's just personal preference, but that's my first thing. I don't assign homework. I also don't weight any assignments. It's just straight points, although I understand that even points in themselves like kind of turn out to be weighted. Generally, I just have like 5-point assignments and 10-point assignments. 5-point assignments are maybe just like some notes that we took, or maybe like a textbook little like activity, and then a 10-point assignment maybe they had to put like a little bit more thought into. But generally things are just 5 or 10 points. I would be willing to adjust that scale and make it more like the, you know, like 4-point grading scale based on the standards and meeting the standards and stuff. I would be willing to do that. It's a ton of work. I teach 3 different preps, 2 different grade levels. I'm in 2 different departments, and it would be, you know, like dozens and dozens and dozens of hours on my own time to set that up. So unless, you know, the district like set that up for me, that's probably not something I'm just gonna implement on my own. Nobody's asking me to do that. So at this point, I just have, you know, different assignments that are worth like 5 or 10 points. I'll talk a little bit more about standards in just a minute. The other big kind of issue that he discusses in this book and people talk about a lot is late work. So, late work. Okay. I think it was probably around like 2020, on top of all of the other issues in education and challenges for teachers, that I feel like a lot of our admin was like, you know, we really just need to accept all late work all the time because we don't know what's going on with students and we just need to accept it all. I was like, okay, fine. I think my late work policy before that was like, I would give them like 50% for work that was late. I just don't do that anymore. My late work policy now is really, really simple, but let me tell you how I got to the really, really simple policy. So I was like, all right, they can turn in their late work whenever, for whatever reason. I created like a Google form, and they would have to fill out the Google form in order to like let me know that they wanted this thing graded. However, more than half of the forms that they would fill out were either for work that wasn't even graded yet. Like, I hadn't even put it in the grade book, but they like thought it was going to be late or something. It was just always a gigantic waste of my time. Or they would fill this thing out, but the work was not done. I would like be, you know, going through all these Google Forms and going through, I always have either 6 or 7 different periods of students. I can't even remember what period everybody is in. That was like built into the form, but sometimes students wouldn't use the form. They'll still just email you and like not tell you what period they're in. And like the email exchanges are always just incredibly rude. Like, you gave me a 0 on this. My mom is mad. I'm like, sucks to be you. What are you talking about? And you have like no memory of like, what is this assignment that you're even talking about? So it just, the communication around it was making me hate my job. I'm not going to do something that makes me hate my job. I don't want to. So the situation that really stressed me out is that I would teach this content. I would have this assignment. I don't grade everything, but I would put into PowerSchool, that's our grading system, you know, the assignment that was going to be graded. There's a due date on Google Classroom, and then a week to 2 weeks later or so, I finally put the grades in. Usually I'm not like a very fast grader. So if somebody didn't have it in at that point, it's like quite late. Just at any time, like weeks and weeks later, for any random assignment, any student whose parents had suddenly decided to look at PowerSchool and like take away their privileges to do something, would send me this like frantic email that wasn't clear. I wasn't sure like what assignments they were talking about. They wanted them graded right now. And that could just happen to me at any moment. And I would always get these emails like when I'm not at work. I do still have my work email on my phone because I'm I will forget things, but it just felt awful to never be able to close something. Like, okay, this assignment is done. I am done talking about this. I am done grading this. We are moving on from this. I never had a sense of closure. Everything was just infinite. And for me as a teacher, that felt horrible. I'm like, I cannot do this. So now here's what I do. I do give zeros for nothing, right? If you have turned in nothing, it is a 0. And he says over and over and over and over again in this book that studies after studies after studies have shown that zeros do not motivate students to turn in work. I'm sorry, but anytime I put zeros into the grade book, I get a flood of emails from every single student who got a 0 and forgot to submit that thing. At my school, in my neighborhood, in my classes, zeros are incredibly effective ways to communicate to a student that you didn't turn in the work. I do not have it. I did not receive it. This is your communication that I do not have this. Putting a little M in PowerSchool or like a 50% grade or whatever does not have the same effect. And also I just still can't really wrap my mind around getting points for doing nothing. That is still just a little bit difficult for me. Okay, but let me continue to explain. I will take late work all the way up until the very end, all the way until the end of the semester, because the grade book like switches over at that point. I have no control over that, but all the way until the bitter end, I will take your late work and I will give you whatever score you earned. If you got 100%, I will give you 100%. So the 0 is not permanent at all. It is communication to you that I did not receive this. I received 0 things, so you have a 0, but you can give it to me later and I will give you whatever score you earned. In order for me to not hate my job, this is what I do for late work now. There is 1 day per month. We have these things called collaboration days. We get out a little bit early. Students get out early. Teachers have meetings. But the class periods are kind of short. It's a little bit hard to do like a full lesson anyway. We're usually doing kind of a shorter lesson. On those days, which are on the calendar from the first day of school, they are preset. On those days, I will accept late work. You bring it to me. I don't ever want to email about late work. I never want to. I'm completely, no. I'm just so completely done with that. I'm not going to email with anyone about late work. So in person, they come up to me and they bring their Chromebook and they show me the completed work. I have PowerSchool open and right then and there, I will change the grade and it will update immediately. I also, though, will not open another tab. I have like PTSD from opening all these different tabs. Was it a thing on Google Classroom? Was it a vocabulary assignment? Was it on Newsela? Was it over here? Was it over here? Which class are you in again? Which period? Oh, let me open that in PowerSchool. And I have like 15 tabs open to deal with somebody's late work. So now I won't open any. All I have open is PowerSchool. You come to me, you show me proof that this thing is done. I will grade it with my eyeballs, whatever it is, and I will put in that grade. And so that occurs once a month. You can get all those points back. And like if you were absent, you might just have to wait till that point as well. I mean, if we have some kind of like downtime in class where we really are all working on something independently, it's kind of a quiet time and somebody comes up to me with their Chromebook and they're like, look, I did this assignment. Could you please update it on PowerSchool? Sure, why not? But that is the only way. That is the only way that it works for me. And that's something that I just find completely missing from this book is just any discussion of how constantly managing late work impacts teachers. This chair makes such annoying sounds. I'm so sorry. I need to like oil it or something. But I'm not gonna deal with late work on unpaid time. That was just like the boundary that I had to come to. Like, I will not respond to emails about late work on my unpaid time. I won't be updating them. I have to go to a computer in order to get it done. Like, this is not something I can just like email you back on my phone about and like fix it quickly. It isn't something like that. So I'm either like teaching or I'm using my prep period to prep for my 3 different courses that I teach, or using it to, you know, input grades of things that I have graded. There's no other time for me to deal with your late work unless it's unpaid time, and I just refuse to do that. So again, it is once a month on those days, and they can come to me and do that. I usually throw in like a couple bonus late work days right before the end of a quarter, end of a semester, or whatever as well. So students have plenty of time and opportunity to get late work into me. I just won't do it. I won't be the one to open the document. You have to bring it to me. So honestly, that has worked really well. And I like that it's just like a very simple answer for parents. They're not usually used to this. So I remember at the beginning of the school year, a couple of years ago, you know, a parent still emailing the teacher for their student, even in like 7th or 8th grade. I'm like, oh, my son didn't get this in. It says it's a 0. Yes, it is. He can turn it in on the late work day, but he did the work. Great. I will look at it and give him points on the late work day. But is he going to lose points over it? No, he's not. Whatever he did, he will get credit for. And they're just like, okay, like there's no arguing with it, you know? Like, I just like to have policies that are just very, very simple, very clear. I'm not going to have like, okay, after 3 days, then it goes down to like 50%. Like, we're not going to do any calculating. This isn't about calculation or like all of that stuff. Just why is anyone wasting their brain on that? It's just about a system that works for everybody. And honestly, like in my class, you shouldn't have that much late work anyway. And if you were absent for just a day or 2, I wouldn't even have noticed. You wouldn't have late work probably, like, because I'm probably not going to grade it for a few days anyways. So I'm giving kids plenty of time to get things in. And if it's late, there's a way to deal with it. So that is my late work policy. I love it. I cannot see myself ever changing it. I think it's so fair and so wonderful. Feel free to steal it. Or if you hate it, don't use it. Extra credit is another thing that he talks about a lot here. I don't offer extra credit generally, but there's one thing that I offer extra credit for. If you can stand up in class and say the name of every single person in our class, then I will give you 10 points extra credit. It's not required, but one person can do it per day. So if you're the first person to come to me and say, can I do the extra credit today? Sure. At the beginning of class, you go around, say everybody's name, I'll give you 10 points. That is something that I want to encourage. I have a lot of pretty highly motivated students that do a lot of like grade grubbing, and they want to have exactly 100% and they want extra credit for those kinds of things. And I don't give it for that kind of stuff. But if you will take some of the attention away from yourself for a few minutes, and if you know the names of everybody else in your class, I will give you extra credit for that. I wanted to find a way to motivate students to know the people around them. So that's the only thing I give extra credit for. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is more of just like my own philosophy. And again, I don't know if this will like change at some point. Like maybe I could be convinced to change my mind here. But in this book, again, he talks a lot about how grading should just be based on standards, like not on effort. Like if you can do the work, you should get the points, versus, you know, like he gives examples of like, what if there's a kid who just like tries really hard and they like are a really good kid in class and they like make a good effort, but they actually can't do the work. Then it's possible that their grade is not reflecting what they know and maybe preventing them from getting like help that they need. I understand that argument. I think that's good. And then on the other side, you know, he says there are kids who can just like ace a test, but they don't do their homework and then they're like penalized for that. A lot of this seems like it has to do with math classes where there's like a specific skill that is either met or not met. I teach mostly history. Here's where that just doesn't shake out for me. Most of the things that we're learning in 6th grade ancient history, for example, students are not going to master them. I don't really have an expectation of an 11-year-old to master a standard about Hammurabi's code, okay? Like, most adults couldn't really explain what that is. We cover ancient India, ancient China, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras. Like, we study a lot of things, and it's really just like an overview course. And I'm not really expecting students to master very much of this material. Maybe I'm wrong here, but what I want them to do is encounter this material. I want them to experience this material and kind of like build their little schema, right? That's what history is. I am constantly being given like new preps and stuff, or like I just have a new random historical fascination. So I'm always learning about new historical things that I didn't really know about before. And the only reason that I'm good at doing that is because I have so much other history in my brain that when I learn new information, it can attach itself to something else I already know, and then that makes it easier. So we're just trying to build a little schema in these students' brains so that when they hear about something in the future or they learn more history later, they're like, oh yeah, okay, this was kind of something about this. Or we like pique their interest, and sometimes they go off and they do a ton of reading on their own about the ancient Egyptian gods or the ancient Greek gods or ancient Chinese dynasties or whatever. But mastering these things is not necessarily my goal. I do want them to participate. I do want them to engage in the discussion and engage in the reading and attempt to write out their thoughts on this material. So it is all about the process. I have them do things like create a skit with a couple friends about Hammurabi's code, like show us one of the laws in Hammurabi's code and, act it out in a skit, and then we have to guess which one it was. Maybe your skit kind of bombed, but you tried and you've read Hammurabi's code. Maybe you like misunderstood it a little bit because you're 11, but then you also watched a bunch of other groups do their skits and you learned a little bit more. So like for me, it is the participation. It is the act of trying these assignments. So I do want you to do the assignments. And again, they're in class. We are doing them together. I'm not giving you homework and making you figure this out on your own at home. But if you're sitting in the back of my room playing Minecraft every day instead of doing any of the activities with us, and then you don't turn anything in and you have a bunch of zeros and you never make up any late work, then yeah, you're not going to do well in the class. You're going to have a bad grade. Very few kids in my classes ever have bad grades. Maybe I'm a grade inflator, I don't know, but it is mostly just about the participation. And I always have 2 guiding principles for grading. This applies to English and history. It needs to be thoughtful and thorough. So if we read a story together and then we work on some, response questions, which we discuss together, and then you have time to write it all out in your own words. It needs to be thorough, you need to finish it, and it needs to be thoughtful. So I don't want to see just like one line that I can tell you did not think about it at all. If it is thorough and thoughtful, you get a good score. If it said to provide examples from the story and you didn't do that, that's not thorough, so that's not going to be a good score. And these things like students could redo and turn in on a late work day as well. So you can always do it better if you want to, but that expectation is always known. Is it thoughtful and is it thorough? Not is it perfect, not did it meet the standard necessarily. I mean, it might just like by default. And again, I could be convinced that standards-based grading is a better way to go, but again, that's just so much work. So it would have to be a collaborative effort, like district-wide, middle school team-wide, those kind of things. That's not something that I'm willing to implement individually. And that's another thing that teachers have to just like contend with all the time, is that we are doing individual jobs in our individual classrooms all the time. We rarely get opportunities to see what other teachers do or like discuss things with other teachers. We don't really have like department meetings very often or time in staff meetings to talk about any of this kind of stuff. So things do turn out individualized. Like, yeah, everybody is grading in their own way because that's how the system is set up. Like, that's not because we are brats and we're selfish and we think that everything we do is the best and we just want to do things our own way. All day long, we're by ourselves in our own room, making our own decisions, seeing how, you know, things impact other things in our classrooms. We are on our own all the time. We have no support from anyone ever. So we do things pretty individualistically. So the only way to change something like that is just to give teachers a ton of support. And I've just never seen that happen, you know, for any topic. So I'm not blaming teachers for making decisions about what works best for them in their own classrooms that they are in every day by themselves, doing all their work by themselves, grading by themselves, coming up with assignments by themselves, dealing with students by themselves, dealing with parent emails by themselves. You got to figure out what works for yourself then in that case. So I know there are a lot of thoughts around grading and all these topics, so please leave your thoughts below in the comments. Let's hear what you guys have to say. And maybe if you teach a different subject, things just feel very different to you. And in your classroom, things have to go very differently. So explain that to us. Talk about that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.